And good morning, everybody. My name is Brett Augustine, a recovery business advisor for North Central Texas Small Business Development Centers. We're a leading provider of assistance for small businesses. We're grant funded, which allows us to offer these services at no cost. How to write a top-notch website and copy, presented by Ashley Cook today. We're looking forward to that. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat room and the chat box, and we'll be happy to get those as we go or at the end. For those of you who don't know Ashley Cook, she's creator of Lane Copywriting with over 13 years of sales, marketing, and analytics experience. Also she shifted into serving small business owners, develop copy for multi-million-dollar brands, social media influencers, and small startups. She's a copywriter as well as a copy coach. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Ashley Cook.
Thank you so much, Brett. I am so excited to be here. Web copy is one of my favorite types of copy to write and to talk about because it's just, there's so many cool things that you can do with it. So I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared and we will dive right in. So like what Brett mentioned, this is the first part of a 3-part series. So today we're going to really focus in on what you do before you actually sit down to start writing your website, or before you go to rewrite your website if you already have one. Part 2, we're going to focus in on like how to actually write the copy. And some tips and tricks around doing that, some of the techniques of writing a powerful website. And then part 3 will be what you do kind of after your website is written. And if you want to see how it's performing, if you want to boost your SEO, I'll also provide a writing checklist and kind of how to troubleshoot some of those very basic things that can make a significant impact on your website's performance. But today is going to be all around kind of that laying that foundational work before you actually put pen to paper. So when you think about your website has the potential to make or break your business. That has largely to do with how well your website is designed, how well it's written, and if it's optimized for your visitors. So you're providing that great user experience for all those who hop on your site, as well as for Google or Bing or Yahoo, whichever that search engine is, and how well they view your site. So when you think about it from a statistics standpoint, because in the copywriting circles, we sometimes have debate, and I've heard this with other small business owners as well. Do I need to have a website in this day and age? Do I not? I'm always an advocate for a website because it does show your brand. It's a place for consumers to go and learn about you. Whenever you look at, I think it's upwards of half of Google searches are for local businesses. And if they don't have a website to find, it's going to make them harder to find you. But when you actually think about website copy and website design, for almost 40%, so 38.5% are going to judge a business by how the website looks. So first impressions do matter. And it actually does not take that long. It's like shockingly quick at how fast those first impressions form. So when you look at when a visitor comes onto your site, within the first 50 milliseconds, so that's like 0.05 seconds, a visitor is going to form an opinion about your website and decide, is this a play, like, do I like this or do I not? If they do and they decide to stay on, then it only takes about 2.5 seconds, 2.6 seconds for a user or a visitor's eye to spot the place on the website that will influence their decision or their opinion the most. So that capturing them early on is going to be really important for keeping them on your website. Before we started, Brett and I were talking about, our attention spans aren't getting any longer, and that's definitely reflected in those website stats. So you only have a few short seconds to grab their attention. You do that through copy, you do that through design. We're going to focus in on the copy piece. I will mention some design elements throughout the webinar as well, because it is so important and it does have a strong overlap with copy. Now, if you look at from a design standpoint, 57% aren't going to recommend a business with a site that's poorly designed or has poor user experience on their mobile device. So it's not just about writing and creating a website that people will visit on their desktop. You have a significant portion of users who are doing so on their mobile. So that'll be kind of more in that part 3 zone of how do you actually look at how your website appears on mobile and what can you do to optimize that experience. And so your website is an incredibly important asset for your business. And I like to think of your website as a salesperson who never sleeps. So you want to make sure that your salesperson is well trained, well represented. They reflect your brand. They're interacting with providing the best customer experience for potential customers who come across your site, just like you would if they were to come into your store or into your office. So what we're going to cover today in today's webinar are 3 main pieces. So the first bucket is around 10 critical pieces of a website. And you want to have all of these 10 pieces reflected in yours. They're like the must-have ones. And if you don't have them in there, they could start to damage your website. So it's important to have them in and to really shine in these 10 areas. The second section of what we'll cover is how to start structuring your web pages or your website. And start thinking about that before you get really into the weeds and end up creating kind of like a patchwork quilt of a website. And then we'll wrap up with 5 simple steps that you can start taking now before you ever start to write or to rewrite your site. So let's go ahead and jump on in. I'll go through the 10 critical pieces of a website. And like Brett mentioned, if you have any questions along the way, just drop those in the chat and I'll make sure to answer those as we go. Or definitely at the end if I happen to miss them, but I have the chat box up, so I'll see them as they come in. All right. So the first critical piece of a website is around clarity. And I list this one first because if you have a website that's really confusing or complicated, your user is going to bounce. This is all around giving your visitor the best experience possible, and that has to do with writing and designing very clearly. So from a writing perspective, you want to make sure that you are very clear on your goal or your purpose for the site. Why do you want to have a website to begin with? What objectives do you want it to meet? So is it, you want to sell products online? You want to get people to book a consultation with you? You want them to come into your establishment? What is your goal or your motivation and purpose behind having your site? Once you're clear on that will start to come through into your copy. Clarity also extends to knowing exactly who you're writing to and what is it that they need to know. If you're writing for an example, if you are, let's say you're a practitioner who works with, with women who want to for fertility, who they want to start a family, your copy is going to be speaking very clearly and very specifically into some of the challenges that women face with starting a family or with fertility. Maybe some of the struggles that they're going through or the dreams that they have, how your services can help them with that specific issue. So it's getting really clear around knowing who you're writing to. And then also deciding what does your visitor need to know? So we'll talk a little bit more about this, about having, I'll mention it later as feast or famine copy, but it's really understanding what's that important information that your visitor needs to know when they visit your website? And then how do you provide that to them in just the right amount of words, not too much, not too less. So that also helps you to have copy that's a lot clearer for your visitor. And there's a saying in the copy community that clear is better than clever, or clear over clever. Although a lot of times, especially with certain brands, there's humor and maybe, I'm a lover of a good pun, but sometimes that can get in the way of communicating what it is you're trying to say to your visitor. So when you're in doubt, clear is better than clever. You don't want to confuse or kind of stump your reader and then I don't know what this website's about. I can't figure out if I'm in the right spot or not. So clarity is super important. The second one has to do with relevance. So this ties into the kind of the quality of what it is that you're writing. So for an example, if you are a financial planner and you work with those who are nearing retirement, it may not be relevant for your website visitor to see copy that's related to more aggressive investing that you typically see in the younger demographics, like the younger investors, or maybe copy related to those who are, just starting a family and you're wanting to, provide investment options for, like for your kids, like early on as your kids, if you offer that kind of as a service. You're going to want to have copy that's appropriate and relevant and applicable really to who your target audience is. And part of that is understanding what's important to them. Kind of like with the example of the practitioner who helps women with fertility, or even the financial planner with those nearing retirement. There are different sets of matters that are important to your target audience that you will help them with that are different than other life stages they may be in, or other factors. So we did a training not that long ago around knowing who your target audience is, and from learning about them from a demographic standpoint and a psychographic standpoint. So you can catch that through the SBDC if you want to be able to deepen your knowledge around who your target audience is, so you can start writing more relevant content for them, so that they know they're in the exact right spot on your website to get the help that they need to solve their problem or help achieve that dream. So when you have higher quality, more relevant content on your website, the more you have of that, the higher you are going to rank. Your website will rank within the search engine. So Google now has continued to develop and really evolve their algorithms to recognize relevant and high quality material on a website. And the reward for that is higher rankings. So they'll see, Google or Yahoo or whatever your search engine that you're optimizing for will start to see that you're writing content that visitors want to read. So they're going to stay on your site longer. And because they're on your site longer, Google's going to reward that with higher rankings over time. So when you're writing your website, it's important to remember that you're writing it for your readers, not necessarily just for the search engine. And what I mean by that is not keyword stuffing throughout your copy. So we've probably seen, you see them a lot on like product descriptions. Like I've seen it on like Amazon or Etsy, where in the headlines, it's like you're buying a bottle of lotion, but this one bottle of lemongrass lotion has like a 4-line long product description. And there's absolutely like no need for a 4-line text on like lemongrass body lotion. There's like, it's stuffed with every possible keyword you can think. And you're like, I can't make sense of this. That is an example of writing for a search engine and not for the reader. So keep your spotlight on your reader, while also being mindful of the search engine element. So part 3, I'll really go into more of that detail of how you can start to integrate in some of those keywords and different SEO strategies to boost your rankings without having to sacrifice the reader or visitor experience. So stay tuned on that part. Now, the third critical piece on your website is connected to this. It has to do with having a website that is focused on your visitor or on your user. So this goes into, when you're looking at it from a copy standpoint, who's the spotlight on? Are you talking about yourself all the time, or your business all the time? Or are you positioning your copy in a way that says, here's how we can help you. We see your pain, we see your struggle, we see your dreams or your desires or aspirations, and here's how we can help you. It's coming from that service-oriented perspective in your copy, and writing, including words and phrases and sentiment that helps the visitor to know that you get them, that you are the credible authority, you're the one who can help them. But it's all around your reader or your ideal client. So it's framing that copy up, whether it's your about page or your product and services page. It's how your business can improve their lives. So in the next part, we'll talk about some ways that you can kind of start shifting that language. But think about also from a user perspective, it's your copy, and then it's also how easy it is for your user or your visitor to navigate through your site. So it's finding what they need, taking the next step, having simple copy or simple descriptions of your website. So I've seen this before on some websites where it can actually be really confusing from a copy, like an understanding perspective, because they'll name the pages in the navigation bar something really obscure. And like, instead of it saying like testimonials or reviews, it'll be something that I'm blanking on an example right now, but it's like the about page. Maybe the about page is easier. Instead of it saying about, or about Ashley, it's some like obscure description of, meet the copywriting genius. Not really, but, some weird way of describing it. It's overly complicated. They're trying to be clever, but they're sacrificing clarity in the process. So how easy it is for your viewer to navigate your site is important as well. So when you're thinking about tips to make your website more user-friendly or visitor-friendly, it's avoiding the novel. So it's avoiding that feast or famine copy. And what I mean by that is if you have like if you're writing famine copy, that is you're providing like not even the bare bones of what they need. This is where you have just a few sentences on a page and it doesn't go into any level of detail, and it doesn't actually give your reader or your visitor enough information to be able to know if you're able to help them. I know that sometimes there is we try to shy away from having just a whole novel on the page, but in the process of that, you can also risk having a little bit, like having too little. Now, the flip side of that is having too much copy where you log on and you're like, oh my gosh, is this like a mini series, mini novella? And they can't actually find the information they're looking for because there's just so much of it. And maybe it's relevant, maybe it's not. Your reader doesn't even get that far because it's too much. So it's finding that balance in between of providing just enough, but not too much. And a lot of that can be addressed through the editing round. Also, keeping your layout simple. So that has to do with your navigation, but that also has to do with how you write and structure your copy on the page. So not having big chunks of text, but dividing them out and incorporating some of those design elements to break apart your copy. So you don't want your website to look like an episode of Hoarders where you're walking in and you're like climbing over mounds of words and you're trying to figure out how to get to where you're going, but there's so many website like word obstacles in the way between where you are, where your visitor is, and where they need to go. And then, like we talked about before, centering your copy on your reader through keeping the spotlight on them. So a little bit more about length, because this is really an important one as well. We talked about you don't need to write a novel, but you do need enough copy on your site so that your visitor knows what you're about, how you can help them solve their problem or get whatever that dream or that goal is, those are your offers, your products or your services, and then how they can take the next step with you. So they need to know when a visitor comes to your site if they are in the right place or not. Like no guessing, it's crystal clear that they're in the right spot, that you can help them, or maybe they're not the right fit or your primary audience. So when you think about the length of a website, longer content does do better in terms of ranking, but it needs to be high quality content that's relevant for your reader. So when you're looking at, there's a lot of debate actually around like how many words should a web page have. It largely depends on the type of website or type of web page that it is. So if you have a blog, you want to shoot for like 1,000 word minimum for that blog. And I know that can sound like a scary amount of words, but it actually can go, if you format it correctly, then it can read really quickly. It only takes actually like a couple minutes, 3 to 5 minutes to read 1,000 word blog. But actually from an SEO perspective, 2,000 words up performs. The blogs that have 2,000 plus words perform better than the ones that are 1,000 word, and for sure the ones that are only 500. But if you're looking at just creating a web page, like a home page or an about page or services page, at bare minimum, shoot for around 400 words. That is the minimum. And that is largely because from a user perspective, you want to provide enough information. But from an SEO perspective, when Google crawls through your page, they look through your content, or their crawlers will go through your content and be able to assign a relevancy index to your copy. And if there's not enough copy for the crawlers to go through, they're going to have a hard time knowing, is this actually going to be valuable to the reader? We just don't have enough information to assess that. So they may penalize you by ranking you lower. So a couple of tips that you can have or that you can do on your website to try to fill out more of the words without overwhelming your reader. A couple of tricks to do that would be one, to have a blog. So those who blog get 67% or so more leads each month. It's a way to continue to over deliver value to your customers or your visitors. It's great for your Google crawlers. to boost your SEO rankings. And it's more opportunity on the regular for you to incorporate keywords and links on your site. So it's a way to continue to build relevancy, build value over time. Now, if you're just wanting to focus in on your basic website pages, one way that you can include more content-rich words without overwhelming your reader is, let's say you're doing let's say you have a services page. Let's say that you're a chiropractor clinic and you offer dry needling services. You could have a web page that goes into detail about like what is dry needling, what it's all about, what appointments are like, how to book an appointment, and then that's really concise and gives the visitor what they need to know. Then what you could do is include an FAQ section at the bottom of that page that collapses in and out, and include different questions that your customers may ask. And so it gives them more of an ability to go in and learn more about it if they want to, without overwhelming your audience and making them all read through that. So you can have questions like, who's a good fit for dry needling? What other services can you pair with dry needling, etc. So that's one little trick of getting more valuable words on a page without kind of like scaring off your reader. All right, so readability. This is one we talked about last week. We had a training on some free tools to help you get your copy more readable. And when you think about readability, this has to do with how easily your copy can be understood. So keeping it in this 5th to 7th grade reading zone, that middle school range, helps to appeal to the widest range of readers, and that includes the skimmer. So there's one stat from the Nielsen Norman Group that said that 79% of users are scanning web pages. So we are living in an era where 8 out of 10 of us are skimming, and we're looking for those high points, and or maybe we want to read, but we want to be able to digest that information quickly. So having your reading zone be in that middle school range helps your visitors to read through and digest quicker and easier. So you want your copy to reach as many people as possible, and keeping your reading level in that lower middle school range keeps your reader from having to work so hard for it. Because if they have to work really hard to understand like a grade 12, website, or even post-grad, I've seen many websites that rate into that post-grad level, they have a higher likelihood of bouncing off of your website because they're just having to think too hard to digest what it is you're trying to share. Now, there is a distinct difference between dumbing down your language and simplifying it. I'm talking about simplifying it. So some ways that you can lower your reading level and simplify your language, because copywriting is the spoken language in written form. Not many of us are speaking in post-grad reading levels. So if you're wanting to lower that reading level and get more conversational and write in a spoken way, you can do that by trimming up your sentences. So this is probably the most common thing that I see with small businesses, is that we try to overstuff our sentences and try to cram 3 sentences worth into one sentence. And so break that apart into smaller ones. Try shortening up your paragraphs. That'll also help for readability on mobile phones. Go for simpler word choices. So in normal everyday life, maybe you don't say the word utilize, but when you sit down to write, all of a sudden you're typing and you're like, and we utilize, and you're like, I don't actually say utilize in real life. So try swapping that out with the word use, for example. Also connected with using simpler word choices has to do with removing jargon. So I see this a lot in the health and wellness space, where there's a lot of medical speak, but every industry has its own jargon. So remove that out, use it for use everyday explanations that people can relate with. That'll help to also get your reading level into that middle school zone. Using an active voice is another tip that you can use. So when it comes to using the active voice, it helps you save on words, it helps you get to your point faster, it helps your copy read a lot smoother. So the difference in that is, say you're a real estate agent and you're saying like the agreement was terminated by the seller. You could flip, that's passive. You could flip that to the active by saying the seller terminated the agreement. That's easier to remember. It's less words. It flows better. So try to write in that active voice, and also be mindful of your adverbs. So instead of saying something like, she like ran quickly, swap that out for a more powerful verb like she sprinted. Or maybe you're in the construction industry and you're using a phrase like tightly secured, swap that out for locked or fastened, like a more powerful verb. And then the last tip on this is using tools to grade your copy. So one of the tools that I love and that we talked about last week was the Hemingway editor, the hemingwayapp.com. It's a free tool that you can use to grade the readability of your text, and it actually will highlight your copy on those areas that are hard to read, or maybe you have too many adverbs, or you're writing in the passive phrase or passive tense. They'll actually highlight your copy, and so that you can lower that reading level down. So, but that your reading level is something that you absolutely want to check whenever you are writing your website. All right, so the next one has to do with formatting. So formatting, when you're writing your web copy, you're writing for three audiences. You're writing for the in-depth reader. This is the person who is poring over every word, every paragraph on every page. They're wanting to be thorough and consume everything that you're writing. There's the skimmer. They're the ones who are hitting the high points, just digesting it quickly. And then your third audience is SEO, so like Google. So when you're looking at formatting, this has to do with helping your reader move through your copy easier. So whether they are reading it through, like they're reading every word, or they're just hitting the high notes, it's formatting helps them to keep having that easy flowing reading experience on your site. So it especially caters to the skimmer who just wants to hit the high notes. And some of the ways that you can do that and to format your copy are here on the screen. So you can bold or italicize keywords or key phrases in your copy. If you have a paragraph or like a sentence where you're listing out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things, turn that list into bullet points instead of having them read it in sentence form. You can also work on keeping your paragraphs short, because then that helps them because they're reading at least the first few words of every paragraph. The more short paragraphs you have, the more they can consume quicker versus having to like sit and digest an entire large chunk of a paragraph. And then another thing with formatting has to do with a little bit more of that design piece, and that's your H1, H2s. So H, if you're not as familiar with web design, H1s, H2s, that stands for your headers. So think about when you go to a site and you see like the big headline at the top. That's going to be like your H1. That's your main title for that web page. And then as you scroll down, you have different sections of your website, and then those different sections are introduced by a subheader. Those subheaders are your H2s, and then you have your copy under that. So when Google crawls, so one, it helps from a user experience because it shows an organization for your reader, that you have different categories on that page for them to read through. But it also helps from a Google or an SEO perspective, because your search engines love to be able to have like an organizational structure in the background for them to crawl through. So it kind of has that dual benefit. So when you're looking at formatting, you're writing for the three audiences. So keeping in mind you are providing enough information for that in-depth reader, but you're writing it in a way that could be easily consumed by the skimmer. So you're doing things like turning them into bullet points or highlighting keywords. Now, one tip that I do is, so sometimes when I'm writing copy, I'll format it as I go, but I don't actually focus as much on the formatting while I'm drafting. When I swap hats and I take off the writer hat and I put on the editor hat, that's whenever I'll go in and do the extra formatting. So I'll actually go and read my copy and I'm pretending to be a skimmer and looking through, okay, what are the key words or key phrases in each paragraph or each section that I want to highlight? Did I list something out that could have been an actual, like a bulleted list instead? Are some of my paragraphs, do they look too long? Do they need to be broken up? I'll actually read through the draft with that mindset of pretending to be a skimmer, and then I'll go through and make those formatting updates in that moment versus trying to remember as I go and write. All right, so the seventh part has to do, this is actually a super important one, but one that is not really like overly exciting to talk about unless you really love spelling or you're a grammar nerd. And I fall in that bucket, but not as much as like my editor. She's very deep in that well. But regardless of if you pay attention to the nitty gritty spelling and grammar, or you want to have someone to help you to do that, the important part is that you do proofread your copy before it goes out on your website. So when you have grammar or spelling issues like prevalent throughout your site, that can start to damage your reputation. It can show that you're not as professional or maybe not as credible. There are stats that people will actually bounce off your site or not recommend it because it's full of errors, because they're like, well, if they don't care enough to proofread their site, then like, is that reflected in the food I order from them? Or are they going to really keep a close eye on my investments? Or is the roof they're going to put over my head going to be like shortcutted? It can start to call into question the quality of your service. So, and even from an SEO perspective, sites or search engines like Google, Yahoo, or Bing, they could even penalize you for that as well over time. So, a few different ways that you can start to make sure that your copy is error-free is you can read it out loud to catch mistakes. That just helps you get out of your head and switch to more of an active mind whenever you're reading or editing your copy. One of the things, and this is kind of an old school tip, but one that I still do to this day, it's not as sustainable friendly unless you recycle your paper when you do this, but it's printing off your actual drafts and then sitting down with a red pen and going through and making your edits. There's something that's really powerful about editing it on a printed page versus on a digital page. That can be really helpful. You can also use tools like Grammarly to catch grammar mistakes, spelling, punctuation errors, things like that. And Grammarly will go pretty far to catch it, but sometimes it misses some of those more nuanced pieces. So that's where, if you wanted to hire an editor or a proofreader to get your copy polished, that can be where it's really helpful, because you get that second set of eyes. But that's all stuff that happens in the editing round of when you write. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about linking. So this is a really important piece too for your website, and this has to do with linking your site to other pages. Now, when I say other pages, that can be internal links. So you're linking within your site to other parts of your site. So it kind of creates a little bit of a spider web. So your user can go in and be able to navigate to different pages that are relevant for what they might be looking for. But there's also a thing called backlinks. That's a type of link where you're actually linking externally and others are linking back to you on their site. So when you are, if you want to create backlinks on your site, that's ways that you could do that would be, let's say that you guest write a blog or an article for another business in the community. Or maybe you wrote an article that got published in an online publication, like an online magazine, or maybe you were featured in your town's or city's magazine and you want to link out to that. You could have that on your site, like as featured in, or maybe like a PR page on your website, and then have those different places where you've appeared, and then hyperlink those to those sites. So that users or visitors who come to your site can be like, oh, wow, there's more information here. And, I want to go learn to see how they appeared in, Dallas Morning News, and here's that article. So it starts to build credibility and build your reputation, and also shows from an SEO perspective that you are a more credible authority in your field, because you're starting to link out to some of these higher quality relevant sources. Now, you could also, if you're writing a blog or you're writing a piece within your website and you're citing a stat there, you could also link to that credible source. So if you're citing something, if you're a health and wellness professional and you're citing something from NIH, the National Institute of Health, you can, you're citing that credible source, so readers can learn more, but you're also creating that kind of backlink environment. So you could also link with other business partners that you collaborate with. So if you're a real estate agent, you can create links on your site that take your visitors to, a recommended insurance company or a recommended mortgage lender or landscapers. If you're a chiropractor, you could link out to a supplement site or medical journals. Or if you have a pillow that you recommend, having that as a linked resource on your site. So that just starts to build your build the kind of value that you want to offer your website visitors. This is something you don't have to necessarily do right from the get-go, but it's linking is one that that you can start to kind of build and incorporate in over time. The same goes with SEO. So I know we talked about that. That kind of shows up in every one of these critical pieces, because anytime that you're writing a website, SEO always kind of fills in the background, if you will, of your website. So when you think about SEO, so 70% of the world's web traffic is being routed through Google. So you want to make sure that you know who you're what search engine you're optimizing for, because Google may have different algorithms or different sets of criteria than like Yahoo or Bing. But since most of it comes through Google, Google is for sure worth paying attention to. And when you think about from an SEO perspective, the stronger your SEO or search engine optimization is, the higher your ranking is going to be across that in that search engine and across other search engines. So, and because you're a local business, almost half of searches on Google are for local businesses. So making sure that you also are incorporating some local SEO strategy into your website. So what does that look like? That looks like including things like keywords, long tail keywords, short tail keywords. I'll explain more about this in part 3. Having a meta description, so a description of your page, having those H1, H2. Some of these are like some technical terms that you may or may not be familiar with, but I'll go through more of that in part 3. But these are, the SEO is something that you always want to have factored in as a critical part of your website. And then to wrap up the design piece, or the 10 critical pieces of a website, I do want to talk about design. So design is what helps your visitor helps to attract or repel your visitor, really. You can engage, there are different tools and strategies and tactics you can employ to keep your visitor on the page longer. So those sites that have images and videos tend to hold their visitor in longer than those who may just have static text. So from a design perspective, it's having that clear, clean, simple user experience. But simple does not mean boring. So I want to make that very clear, that that having something simple and clean, it's like going into a house that that doesn't have clutter on the floor, that you can move through the living room and the kitchen and the bedrooms. You can find what you need in the closet. You can actually step fully into your closet and pull out the shirt that you need. It's organized and easy to find, and maybe it has this warm, inviting feel, like you are in a good friend's home, and every room flows from a design perspective, and it's picked up and clear. Now contrast that with, you walk into a house and it is like a house on the episode of Hoarders, where you don't know what's the living room, you don't know what's the bathroom, you're afraid to open the closet or the refrigerator, you can't even see like under the bed, you can't even find where the bed is, and it just doesn't feel very pleasant or comfortable to be in that. So when you're thinking of your website from a design standpoint, having something that is clean and engaging inspires people to want to stay on your website longer. So when you think about that, that's the look and the feel and the tone, and how simple and easy it is to go through the pages and find the information. It's that feeling you want to create. It's the navigation element. It's also how the copy is presented. So I'm sure that we've all been on those websites where you go to the home page, or maybe you click into the about page. I see it a lot on about pages, and it's just like one massive block of text, and you're like, I don't want to read that. Like, I want to know, but I don't want to have to work like that hard and spend all that time to just read that, because I'm going to lose my spot in that long paragraph. I don't know. So from a design standpoint, you can use those design elements to present your copy in ways that will keep people engaged. So as sad as it makes me to say this as a copywriter and copy coach, the best copy cannot overcome poor design. Design is such an important piece. There's something about the design and our brains and our interaction. There's actually been studies that have been shown that what am I trying to say? There are studies that show about the brain's interaction with websites and how when you have the brain is really good and highly skilled at predicting. And once it's able to predict something, it can get bored with it. So that's why when you go on websites or sales pages, you see like background colors will change. You'll have different like icons and symbols or images or photos or copies presented, kind of changed up where it's presented on the page. And all of that is to keep the brain engaged and to prevent it from guessing. Because as soon as it can guess, it's gonna check out because there's nothing new for it to explore. So design can help you do that. It can help present your copy in a way that will actually enhance the copy. And in a perfect world, the design and the copy are just like a match made in heaven. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in. I see there's a YouTube video in there. Brett, what's the YouTube video?
Actually, it's a YouTube channel so that everybody can go to all of Ashley Cook's and others presentations that have been done so far, so that if you get to where, oh, you couldn't attend today, but you wanted to go back and catch part 1 because you've caught part 2, then you can go back to that link, which is in the chat room, for everybody to be able to go and see everything that's available and go back to all the different parts if they missed any.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. I wasn't sure if you were going to try to Rickroll me and like link me to an 80s video.
No, I wouldn't do that. Although,
I mean, it would have been worth it, but you know.
yeah, absolutely. Well,
Awesome. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat, so we'll just go to the next section, which is around how to structure your website. So this is, we're going to focus in on the copy piece of it and how do you actually start to structure the copy across your site and within the individual pages. So when you think about, you know, why do you need to have a structure for your website? Why is that important? Having a solid structure means that it's easy for your visitors to click around and find what they need. It goes into how your different pages are laid out, but it also includes the copy on each page. So those are actually the 2 types of structures that we're going to talk through to have on your site. So this is kind of starting to bring it into something that's really specific and tangible for either a site that you want to write or to take a look at your own site that may already exist and start asking, okay, how can I actually optimize this site that exists? So I'll walk you through kind of how to map out your total website structure and then how to start mapping out each individual page, both from a copy perspective and both with the goal of creating the best visitor or user experience possible for your visitors. So this first one is around mapping out your total website structure. So I know this may sound like super simple and really obvious, so just bear with me because it's important. When you think about a web page, you typically have one main page that you're going on to, and then that one main page is like the landing page that has links that go to other pages on the website. And those other pages are broken into, you know, smaller categories that all kind of roll into this one main page. So to get really specific, that can look like your homepage being that one main page, that big landing pad page. And from that, there are links to an about page, links to, you know, products or services that you may sell, and then a contact page. And of course, you can have other categories on your website too, like reviews or press or your blog or trainings, things like that. So when you start to build it down, this starts to help you understand, okay, I have this main homepage and then I have these categories. Sometimes you can also have subcategories that get created out. And what that will look like is, let's say on your homepage, then they go into your about page, and from your about page, they then go into a contact page or a contact form to reach you, to learn more about you or to get on a call with you or something like that, or book an appointment. Now, if you have like products or service, whether you have products or services, maybe you have one main page that kind of goes into that. And then from that products or services page, they can go to individual service pages, individual product pages, or they can go to checkout. So you can start to see kind of a hierarchy that starts to get created from your website, but it becomes very intuitive. And if this feels like, well, wow, duh, this is like really basic, that's the goal. You do not want to have anything overly complicated from a website structure or hierarchy. because that's gonna like that. It just makes it harder for you to write your copy. And it can make it more tangled and confusing for you and for your visitor. So when you start looking at it from that's kind of your total website. Now, if we start to break it down into how do you start to structure out each page, this goes into like getting really specific on a page. So if you're wanting to have like a home page, what I'm going to actually talk about, and this applies for all the pages, so I'll back up for a minute. There's a strategy called the inverted pyramid, and the principle behind this strategy is the most important information of your website is at the very top. That is where the vast majority of your viewers or your visitors will they'll see that information. So think about when you go onto a page and you're scrolling through, you're for sure going to see what's at the very top, the above the fold or that visible, like that first initial section. And you're going to scroll down a little bit and you're going to keep scrolling, and then maybe you get what you need, or maybe you're like, no, this isn't right, or I'm kind of bored. But you have a lot lower of a chance of seeing like what's at the very bottom of that page versus at the very top. Well, now imagine that kind of multiplied out by all the potential visitors for your site. So the inverted pyramid strategy says, we're going to put the most important information at the very top of your website. And so think about the most important part, like you're starting off with that headline. Donald Miller with StoryBrand, he talks about this concept called the grunt test, which is when you're creating that headline or that intro statement onto your page, in the technical term, it's your H1. You're writing it in a way that if a caveman or cavewoman were to read that headline text, they would be able to grunt back to you the meaning of it. So the principle is you could write this headline it's writing it in a way that anyone could read it, understand it, and know that they're in the right spot or not. And it's clear enough and compelling enough that they'll keep on reading. But that's the most important part. Then you start to look at what are some of those other key important elements? Like when you start working down from the headline, that's the who, the what, the where, the why. So who's your target audience? Who do you serve? You want to make sure your visitor knows who it is that you work with, what it is that you do, maybe where you are, if location is an important, factor, why they should work with you, or why they should buy, what it is that's unique about what it is that you offer, or the ways that you can help them solve their problem or their pain point. So it's that copy that lets them know they're in the right spot and to keep on reading, and provides that relatability for them to be like, okay, they get me, and they understand what I'm going through, and I think they can help me. Then as you start moving down the page, you go into the supporting details, and this is the how. This is maybe you offer a coaching program that helps them, or you're a fitness trainer and you have you kind of establish who you help and what you help them achieve, and then the supporting information would be, well, I do this through like private workout sessions, group sessions, and online workouts. And then you have some reviews that or testimonials that people give, or case studies that show before and after transformation to support that information. That's your supporting. Then you go into like the background section, which is a little further down on your website. That goes into about you. So if we use the fitness instructor example, maybe you talk about how you've been in the fitness industry for 20 years, and you helped high school students reach win at state, or compete. You have competitive, reach their competitive goals in martial arts, or whatever your background is that your reader would care about. Maybe you have a link in there to join your mailing list, or maybe you have an ebook or a quiz or something that they want to be able to take, and so that you can get their email address. And then you think of kind of that bottom section of the email, which is the nice to know, but you don't have to have it information. So, things like social media links. Some websites will allow you to, flow in your Instagram grid. Sometimes, you may have a map, or it's just that nice to have information, but it wouldn't make or break your business if they didn't see it. So that's kind of an outline when you're approaching each page of the inverted pyramid scheme. So you would apply this strategy to, not pyramid scheme. I watch culty shows, and we watched one recently on pyramid schemes. This is the inverted pyramid strategy. And you can apply this rationale or this methodology to each page that you write, starting with the most important, need to know, all the way down to the nice to have. All right. And now we're going to go into the final section here, which is 5 simple steps. We're going to bring this all home, bring it all together, 5 steps that you can take before you write. Now, before I do that, I do want to remind y'all about the amazing resources and folks at the North Central Texas SBDC. They are a wonderful wealth of information to really help you go through and overcome your business challenges. They provide no cost confidential advising if you have certain obstacles or problems you're trying to work through, opportunity areas to help you reach that next level of success. They provide trainings and resources like this webinar and a whole host of other things. So visit their website at sbdc.nctc.edu or the phone number on your screen if you want to learn more and sign up about that. All right, we have a question. What is a sitemap on a website? Oh, yep. Brett, do you know?
I do. You actually explained it. A sitemap is basically the pages and how to get them, how it's designed, kind of like what you were talking about, where you have your main page and then you have your others. And what it does is it's a quick way to go directly to one of those pages for people that are more, what's the word, technically visual, I guess, about websites and things like that. Not every website has them to where everybody can just click and go, but it's basically a site map is how you design your website.
But isn't it? It is more of that technical. It's not like it's different than a navigation bar, which
Exactly.
is usually, is like the tabs on the top of a screen, or if you're on your phone, it's the 3 lines that you click and it tells you the links. The sitemap is more of that technical look to it.
Exactly.
It's usually like white with like blue letters. I think I've seen those before.
So basically, it's the details of your website and how it's designed, and it's great for other designers when they're trying to copy what you did right. I mean, it's great for people that are looking at how well you designed your site.
Swipe with integrity. That's what we say. Thank you for that. That was a much more eloquent explanation than I'm not the most well-versed of explaining like deep technical things. And so I would just fumble around with that. So Brett, you did a wonderful, thank you for explaining that so eloquently. All right. So 5 simple steps that you can take before you sit down and start to write or rewrite your website. So the first step is around getting clear. So we talked about this at the very beginning. This has to do with getting clear on your audience. Who is your ideal buyer? Who is your primary audience? I'm not saying that, you won't you won't work with those who don't fit that, but this will help you to hone in your messaging and hone in how you write. The more specific, the better. People really resonate with specifics, and there's a saying, if you write to everybody, you write to nobody. So that takes getting clear on who your audience is, what they're going through, their concerns, their goals, their dreams, etc. It's getting clear on your company's brand, the tone and voice that you want to have come through your copy. Are you more buttoned up, polished, and professional? Are you more playful, fun, and with a little sassy edge? And you want to have that tone consistent throughout your website copy. And then also getting clear on your offers or how you serve your audience. This has to do with the benefits or the outcome that your products or your services offers. Like, what difference does it make in their lives? What's important? What are important pieces of your offers? So it's getting a clear understanding on how to do that. The next tip is around getting some inspiration. So Brett kind of tiptoed around this a little bit, where you get ideas from other websites that you like and websites that you don't like, actually. So you can do this for websites in your industry. I also encourage you to do this for websites outside of your industry. So if you're looking at websites that are in your industry, so if you're a health coach, that works with student athletes, you're looking at other, pull up, a handful of other websites of health coaches who work with student athletes, and take note of, how are their pages laid out? What do I like about how they've written their copy? What do I not like? What strikes a chord? What doesn't? Some of this starts to get you more in tune and more into a feel of how to write your own and kind of what's out there in the marketplace. It's competitor analysis, but it's also like it's inspiration too for you. Also, when you're typing in health coaches in Dallas or, student health coaches in Louisville or something like that, you're clicking into those first few links, you're also pulling up website examples that Google has determined is highly relevant. And so, because you're pulling from that first or maybe even second page. So you're looking at websites that are highly ranked by Google. So you're starting to get some ideas there that you could potentially take and mold and create your website from. But if you also do it outside the industry, that can really help you to break some of those barriers and get out of the box of what everyone else in your area is doing. So if you are, a chiropractor, you could look at like ergonomic or functional design websites, or, because there's a little bit of a relatability like in those industries. You could look at, if you're a coffee house, you could look at travel websites and get some of that, like, because you're kind of maybe going for that feel or that vibe. So you're applying that same approach of noting what you like, what you don't like, how they're presenting their copy, how they're structuring maybe some design inspiration. And then you'll take those likes and dislikes and start to kind of get an idea of how you want your website to look like. Also pay attention to the tone and the voice, how they're coming across as well, because then that can give you some really cool ideas for some different angles that you may want to take, or how you want to set yourself apart from others who are doing, the website, whatever the website examples are that you're looking at. All right, the third piece is around deciding what website that you want to have. So there's there's two different types of websites. You have the one scrolling page. This is where I've seen this a lot on like coaches or financial planners websites where all of their information, it's just one long scrolling page, and their navigation bar actually shoots you to different sections on that one homepage. So it could be that intro text, your services section, an about section, and then your contact form at the very bottom. So that's one long form, kind of one scrolling page. Or do you want to have multiple pages? This is where you have a shorter homepage, and then you have like a distinct about page, a distinct contact page, and there are all these distinct pages. I've also seen a hybrid of the two where you have that one long scrolling page and then maybe one extra page for like a separate page for a blog, or a separate page for an about. So maybe it's a home and an about page. So but it's important to decide what type of website you want to have before you start writing it, because that will guide you on the level of copy that you want to be able to write on that page. So if you're doing a multi-page website, you don't necessarily need to have that extensive amount of copy on the homepage that you would if you just had a one scrolling page. All right, the next one, or next step, is deciding what categories of information you want on your site. So once you've decided the kind of website you want to have, make the decision then on what chunks or categories of information are most important to your reader. Is it important, it's important for them to know about you or your team, testimonials, having a service or products category on your, in your website, having a contact page, if you want to have a PR page, or if you're having like an annual event, if you're having a summit or a major conference, maybe you want to have a page dedicated for just that. So it's deciding kind of what categories you want, and then starting to kind of create that hierarchy. Knowing those categories will also help you to kind of to budget out your time, and when you start writing each page to know, kind of create that roadmap for you to write your copy for each individual page. And then finally, start outlining what information you want to have on each page. So we talked about that with the inverted pyramid strategy, where you start with the most important information first, and then you go down to the nice to have. So you have the most important information, the supporting information that kind of buttresses that those important details, and then any background or information to fill in the gaps, and then you end with the nice to have. So you'll apply that across each of these pages that you've decided that you need to have, or the sections that you would need to have if you are in doing a one scrolling page kind of website. And then at that point, you are ready to draft your website. So that wraps up where we're at on part one. So part two, the next session that we have, on Thursday, we are going to get into some of those time-proven techniques on writing the website or writing your website, writing it in a way that will draw readers in and will keep them on your site for longer. We'll cover some tips and tricks, also some major writing pitfalls you will not want to have on your website. And then by the time we end with part 2, you'll have some skills and a plan for writing the different pages of your website. So, but these steps to prepare will help help you with that groundwork to come into that part 2 section and really start to draft out a compelling website for your visitors and for your business. So we have a question: how often should a background picture or pictures be changed, like on a homepage? That is a great question. My 2 cents is that it varies by industry. So if you are like in the design industry or fashion industry, you're going to be changing that out a lot more frequently because your trends change more. Like if you're in fashion or jewelry, those change by season, right? If you're a home designer, maybe a little less frequently than like clothing changes, but you'll want to make sure that that stays fresh and up to date with what's in the time. So really it depends on your industry. So like from a, if you're thinking like, if you're a roofer, if you're a massage therapy place, or like you have a spa, you can do that a lot less frequently because your trends may not be as like they may not change as frequently. But I like to recommend updating it maybe once a year or twice a year. You don't have to update every photo. You can just go in and kind of refresh a photo here, a photo there. But it's helpful to look through your copy and your images at least once or twice a year to make sure that what you have on your site is still relevant. Because in addition to your images, your copy can also get stale and out of date because your consumer, your ideal buyer continues to evolve. Maybe their problems or their dreams get a little bit more nuanced or they change. We saw a very kind of hyperbolic example of that with the pandemic, right? So if you think about like a digital marketing agency or even copywriting, our messages all had to pivot drastically for when our clients, their businesses, their doors like shut and more people were flooding into the online space. So our message, like the problems became different, the goals became different. So our messaging had to adjust to reflect that. Same with other businesses too. If you have restaurants that their clientele has changed significantly, and especially like in this northern DFW area, if you're in this like North DFW zone, where so much of, if you're a local business and you're having so much development, you're going to be having a lot of demographics that change. So it's helpful to keep a pulse on those changes and checking in on your website a couple times a year to make sure your messaging is still hitting on point. All right. Any other questions? What else y'all got? How many have a website already on this?
I'm afraid to raise my hand after this conversation. I do.
I know the answer now. No, I'm not going to ask you to. I'm not going to ask you to drop it in, and I'll
No. It's obvious that I need to go back all the way to Grammarly, start there probably, and
Oh no, do
I
you have
need to put
typos?
way more content and things. But I started with a placeholder for mine so that I would make sure that I at least had the website there and they could reach me.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Or reach our company. So yeah, anybody else have any questions though, please feel free to drop it in there, or you can unmute yourself and talk directly to Miss Ashley and she'll be happy to respond. I was told to wait in one of our other classes. They said give everybody a chance because they're, so wait, just be quiet, somebody will respond.
Should we create a moment of awkward silence?
I think that's what they were saying, yeah.
Should we get really close to the camera and just look at people? No, I'm kidding.
I really appreciate all your input. It's really amazing. I'm over here in the UK and listening in. Thank you. Just a big thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, it's helpful to audit, to like take a look if you already have a website to kind of go back to the basics a little bit, to just look back through yours. You know, in the part 3, I'll go through some specific tips around how can you start to boost your SEO, but and fix some of those major areas. So we'll do some diagnostics, and I'll talk through some of those important metrics that once you have a website up and going, or if you have one now, you can start to look at those and use those as those kind of trigger points to say, oh, okay, do I actually need to like go in and make some changes, and what changes do I need to go make? So there's some free tools and metrics that I'll walk you through as well. So I'm so glad that you joined in today.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it's great that we've been getting a lot more global interaction lately, and we're really happy to have everybody participate, as this is all of us trying to be better and just taking some courses to make ourselves better. There was a couple things that really stood out to me today that you were talking about, not just the great tools that we've already learned about and how to make your copy really good content wise, but one of the things that stood out to me was how to structure it, how you were planning it. I think that's key to really being able to understand where the links are going to go, because one of the things that I learned many years ago when websites were, oh, this is going to kill me, brand new to people, you know, and what was happening was the internet was exploding, was you learned really quickly that people don't want to go through too many clicks to get to their information. So if you do that site map, if you will, you're trying to create a flow of information that says 1, 2, maybe 3, and I got all the information I was looking for. And if you go to 4, it's usually too far. I hate to
When
say
you
it, but
shorten
the
that.
attention span is like, you know, click and go. That's where we're at these days. So when you're designing your websites, I think that's pretty huge to be able to go ahead and plan it out. So that was big for me. Thank you for sharing all that.
Oh, for sure. And I think also when you think about like how many clicks does it take, it reminds me of that commercial with the owl, like how many licks does it
How
take
many
to
links
reach
to
the
a certain
computer? Yeah,
Tootsie Roll Pop? Oh my gosh, that's so real.
exactly.
It is so
Um,
real.
it's so true. And I think it's also it's understanding the number, but then it's also asking the question, how can I make that shorter for the visitor? And I think if you have a website, one exercise that might be helpful before you start jumping in and going into like fixing mode is to like look at your current state. So is taking your website now and grabbing some post-its and creating, you can do this on your wall or on your desk, writing down the name of every page on your website and then creating that hierarchy that I showed, just so you can start to see how it's all connected. Because then once you see it, I'm a big fan of like once you see it, then you know like where to hone in and fix it. I worked with a systems specialist at the end of last year who was helping me to streamline all my systems, and I had no idea how complicated I made them until I saw her mapping out the process on the screen. And Brett, she ran out of room in her tool because
Oh
of one of my
no.
process. I know she had to add at the extra end. And what I realized was I did something that I know that other business owners do, and it's so easy. And it's you're building your business, and over time you just end up adding something on here and adding bolting on something there, and before you know it, it's more complicated than it should be. But we're so busy and just going 100 miles an hour, we don't usually have that luxury of time to stop and say, is this the best way to be doing it, not just for my client or my user or my visitor, but also for me. And
Right.
going through those exercises helps.
Well, I like that CSI attempt there with the sticky notes. I think it's a great idea. It really is, because you can literally physically move them around until it works with what you want. Or sometimes put two of them together because you realize you're talking about the same thing, like you were saying,
Absolutely.
streamline it. So that's huge. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. Do you have any closing comments that you would like to give everybody before I tell them about what's coming up? Don't worry, Ashley is coming back for part 2 and 3 coming up very soon. So Ashley, if you have any closing comments, I'll leave it to you real quick before I tell them about the up and coming.
No, I'm going to save my comments for Thursday. I'm really excited about Thursday because that's really getting into some of those techniques and the nitty-gritty details of how can you actually start getting the words on the screen. So I'm excited for that. So I'll save all my comments for then.
Okay, very good. And Paula just wants to remind everybody that it is definitely Tuesday. That would be February the 22nd on 2022. So there you go. 22, 222, 22. Yeah. So there. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Now with that, let me do this real quick and just give everybody a little up and coming. CJ Pettit is going to be here just shortly this afternoon at 1 o'clock as we're continuing Texas Workforce Commission Decoded. And how to write a top-notch website, part 2 with Ashley Cook coming up on the 24th. And she'll be following up with part 3 on March 1st as well. So with that said, we also have HR Solutions, Recruit and Retain by CJ Pettit as well coming up. And the 28th, Audit Proof Your Business by Angela Randolph. And if you haven't attended any of hers yet, I highly recommend it because when it comes to finances, this is exactly the type of person you want to ask questions to. She's amazing. And we're going to finish up on March 2nd with Business Plan Basics with Rebecca Schultz. So thank you all so much for attending today. If you have any questions about these upcoming seminars, you can go to our QR code listed right up in the top portion of the screen there. And that'll take you straight to our Eventbrite site so that you can sign up for future things. And if you missed anything, don't forget in the chat, you can go backwards in time to our YouTube channel and rewatch anything or slow it down if everything was too fast for you. Because I know there's a lot of information. Many times we have to just slow things down. There's also the SBDC nctc.edu website, which is where you can go and schedule time with an advisor or get tools to help you with your business and free access all the time to our library and wealth of information and advisors. So we're really happy to do that for you at no cost, which also reminds me that we are funded and we want to thank the Small Business Administration, the state of Texas, North Texas SBDC Regional Office, and North Central Texas College for making all this possible. We also want to thank Miss Ashley Cook again today for all of the great things that she had for us to get us kicked off on this series. We look forward to parts 2 and 3 coming up. We thank you all for joining us and we look forward to seeing you next time. This will end our webinar for today. You have an amazing week, everybody.